Hi, thanks for tapping in. We're going to walk through today the wave pattern. And this pattern was recently featured in the Homespun Crochet Beginners and Beyond magazine. This is what we're going to work on today. Thank you to everybody who has purchased this. Thank you for sharing your creations. Thank you for touching base when you've got queries, for not giving up and persevering with something new. I hope this tutorial gives you some guidance and understanding of the rhythm, the movement through the pattern, the stitches, the increases, the decreases, and anything else. So touch base if this was helpful, if it wasn't helpful, if there's something you'd need further clarification on. I will do my best to help you so you end up with your own beautiful creation and, well, functional bag. All right, so I'll get started. I'll just talk about the bag first, and then I'm going to work a few rounds just so you can see how my stitches work and how the round falls together and how they look. Particularly in this center section here, we start with a chain center and we work treble crochets. Now this pattern is all written in UK terminology, so if you're a fan of the US version, just flip that to a DC. So it works in the round. We're not slip stitching the end of each round. It's just going to be one continuous spiral. So we start. So I've put a marker here at the end of round 1 and the start of round 2, so you can see that the marker would then move up through. So the indicator between the end and the start of another round is through a chain space. Now you can see the waves or the spiral patterns. This is the base of the bag. I've just flattened it so you can see the base. Now, to form this shape, to get that spiral pattern, there are increases just to one side of the spiral, and that is consistent through the whole, through each wave of the pattern. You'll just be increasing on one side. It changes as you move through the rounds. It's consistent up to round 7, where you'll work an increase and then just straight stitch along the rest of the wave. But then at round 8, you'll start to incorporate a decrease stitch. And those decrease stitches on the other side of the wave will continue through the wave up into the wall of the bag. Okay, so now that we've walked through the base of the bag, I'm just going to spin this up and we'll start talking about how it moves through up into the wall or the side of the bag. You can see it sort of naturally wants to poke at this point here. Now that is round 10. So it's round 10 going up into round 11 that it'll start creating the wall of the bag. And you can see when we pivot through from this part, we've got a movement of the wave sort of gently curving, and then we'll go more into more of a sharper point coming up into here, into maybe about halfway through the wall of the bag, just over. Now it continues through. You'll increase only on the beginning repeat of each wave. Right, as we continue to walk up from the base and into the wall of the bag, we've started our decreases down here at round 8. We're moving up now into round 13, where the spaces become large, and so the net starts to form, and a treble stitch is added into the first chain space. Now, you can see those decreases continue. Now you'll start to add more decreases as you hit the peak of the wave. And as those decreases are added, you can see that to the side of the wave, these lines of trebles are starting to form, which are the net, and that starts increasing, which gives you then the rest of the bag. Now they will all come off the side. Now I won't walk through every single round and how they're added. That should be clear on the pattern, but know that it's happening right after the decreases on each wave. So in contrast to that, on the other side of the wave, so the side of the increasing, that remains steady. You can see you've got the same treble and chain repeat right up the side of each wave peak. That remains constant. So the netting portion is only increasing straight after each part of the wave. All right, so we're going to move up, and you'll work several rounds after you've finished the peak of the wave. You're going to do several rounds of straight netting, and then you'll hit the final round. The final round is when the I-cord handle is incorporated or is worked. I'll just flatten this out so it's easy to see. I'm not going to work the I-cord handle and show you in this tutorial. I'll just talk a little bit about it. There is inside the magazine a step-by-step process. There's 8 steps in it of how to create it as you work through that last round. It talks about how to kickstart the I-cord base, and then finally how to finish it off. Look, if you're a knitter as well and you're not a fan of crocheting an I-cord, you could always switch it and knit it as well once you've started it and you're finishing it off with your crochet hook as well. It's just a thought. Right, so to start it here, you can actually see we've worked a treble, our chains and our treble again. Now to start this, you actually have to flip your work to the inside or the wrong side of the bag, and then you have to gather up 3 loops ready to start that I-cord, and then you work it from there. So when you get to it, so it will have a slight twist. You can see that's the back of the stitches. You work it through, but once you've worked it, it will look beautiful. You will have that nice consistent round stitch formation. I think this is really it's one of my favorites. It does have a little bit of stretch to it once you put some weight in the bag as well, but it is pretty sturdy. And then finally, when you finish, you will have obviously 3 loops remaining on your hook, and you keep those 3 loops on while you start that next stitch to keep going on that final round. And then as you're pulling through on your final loop, you'll polish it off, and then you continue working as normal, and you do that twice until you come around to the end and finish off your work. All right, so now we've done a quick rundown of the bag and how it's structured and how the movement of the stitches make that wave formation, we're going to go now and just start off on the base, and we'll work through a few rounds just to get us started. Let's kickstart and move through a few rounds. I've just created the foundation chain and joined that, and then worked the treble stitches into that chain circle. Now I'm just adding my scrap yarn. My preference was for this project was to use a scrap piece of wool or yarn, doesn't matter what you choose, just to weave in and out of each round, and I could see how it was as my round marker. All right, so as I said, I've worked the chain foundation and then the trebles. Now the chain start for round 1 is counted as a stitch, so I'm going to work that decrease into the 1, 2, 3rd chain at the beginning of round 1. It's going to look a little bit funny when you first start, but don't be off put. we're not using slip stitches to join the round. You're not going to have a perfect circle in this instance. Almost looks like a teardrop right now. So we're going to keep working that. So I've just worked my first increase here, and then I'm going to work my treble. On chain, working to the next stitch. Next increase, treble, chain. All right, so that's 2 repeats done. Okay. Now while I work this second round, I'm just using a contrast color just so you can see the first 2 rounds and how they look. And then we'll move on to a different color. I am still working in the Sasawashi flat bamboo paper. All right, so I have just finished the repeats, and I've just worked, I'll move that stitch marker back up. I've just worked the final stitch of round 1. You can see that's the last stitch before my round marker. I've worked my chains now for that last repeat of round 2. I'm going to move my marker up, and this will be the next stitch just here that I need to work into. Now we're going to start round 3. So as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the bag, you're always going to start with an increase. Until you get to the very end of the wave, it's always an increase at the very start of the repeat of each wave repeat. Okay, I've just worked the last stitch of round 1. You can see that was the final stitch before we hit the marker, and I've also finished the increase and the stitch and the chains of the round 2 repeat. So I'm going to flip my marker over the side here, and now I'm going to change my color. Obviously in the pattern you don't, this is just for the tutorial sake. Though I don't normally draw my yarn like this, okay? So just please ignore how I'm working these stitches. One, 2. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, on each side, on each wave, you're increasing at the very start. So we've got our increase here, now we've worked our other stitches across, followed by the chain space. So I'm going to work the next repeat now, skip that chain space, and work into that next treble stitch. Right, that's the final stitch in the chain space of round 3. Now it looks a little bit wonky. What you can do is just give it a little tease out, and you can start to see the beginning of these waves taking place. All right, now we're going to work round 4. Switch my marker all around. We'll start off by skipping that chain space, and we're going to work the next increase, the beginning of the wave, and work our stitches across. So that's 2 repeats done. 2 repeats. Now it's complete. of round 4. So round 5, 6 and 7 will all be the same. The increase goes into the first stitch. You work straight stitches across the wave, skipping the chain space and working on to the next one. Now I'm going to zoom through and I'll get you to round 8, and that's where things start to change. And I've completed 7 rounds. I'm just going to start now on round 8. So I've moved my stitch marker over. I'm going to work the increase again. Then work stitches straight across. All right, so I'm left with 2 stitches here, and I'm just going to work this decrease now. Okay, 2, 3 chains now, it's increasing, and then I'll work now the next repeat. So back into the increase, and then working the stitches across again. All right, so that's the 10. Now we're going to work that decrease again. All right, so that's the end of that repeat. So we've worked 2 waves of round 8. You can still sits flat. I hope this has given you a good understanding of how the pattern is structured, how the stitches are working to create that wave and move up into the sides of the bag while it decreasing the size of the wave and the netting starts to form. Shoot me a message if you've got any more questions, but I hope you make your own lovely bag. I hope you enjoy working it and you come up with something really special for yourself. Happy crafting.